In the name of God, who creates, redeems, and sanctifies. Amen.
Amen.
Everybody be seated. From today's psalm, oh, how good and pleasant it is when brethren live together in unity. Indeed, how good and pleasant it is to be with you all here today. This Sunday, we also symbolically join hands with all of the Trinity brethren and sisterin, all the brothers and sisters and siblings from long ago, because today we're commemorating the 150th anniversary of the first public worship service held by the Episcopal Church in Asbury Park. The first Episcopal services in our city were held a year earlier in 1873 in the offices of city founder James Bradley, even though he was a Methodist. And then services were also later held in private homes. But then in the summer of 1874, Episcopalians gathered from all corners of Asbury Park to worship in a tent in Library Square Park across the street, where we were supposed to be today, except there's a heat wave. So they gathered there in Library Square Park on that day, and then a year later, in 1875, they founded this church, Trinity Church, on this same plot of land upon which the church still stands today, although a different building. Originally, they built a wooden structure, and then they outgrew that. This week's commemoration is a milestone in the lead up to the celebration of our parish's 150th anniversary celebration next year in 2025. Now, I did a little research into what was going on in 1874 at the time of that tent service. And I looked at what was going on in the world, in the United States and in New Jersey. And while it did not seem to me at first glance to be one of the more eventful years, like for instance, 1861 when the Civil War began, or 1865 when it ended, I did note several items that had a major impact at the time, and then I think even more so in the years and decades to come. So, taking a look back at 1874, on the imperialist front, in March, France asserted sovereignty over what is now Vietnam, then called Indochina, and the United States gained exclusive trading rights in Hawaii, the Kingdom of Hawaii at the time. In September of that year, U.S. troops continued the removal of indigenous peoples from their native lands with the defeat of the last sanctuary of the Kiowa, Comanche, and Cheyenne tribes at Palo Duro Canyon in Texas. On the political front, Reconstruction in the American South began to lose steam. In September, a group of white supremacists in New Orleans staged a coup that briefly toppled the governor, while in November, the House of Representatives changed parties for the first time since 1860, signaling that the nation in general was moving on from the Civil War. The national retreat from enforcing racial equality ushered in the Jim Crow era. On the cultural front, in April of 1874, a group of young painters, including Claude Monet, put on an exhibition in Paris that gave rise to the term Impressionism. In May, Verdi's Requiem was first performed in Milan. In July, the Philadelphia Zoo opened. Closer to home, here in New Jersey, the state that year made school attendance compulsory. Then an ailing Walt Whitman moved to his brother's home in Camden. Thomas Edison opened his laboratories in what is now his namesake of the township of Edison. And in the Episcopal Church, the Diocese of New Jersey was divided into two, leading to the formation of what would eventually be called in the north the Diocese of Newark, while down in the south, the central and south, we retained the name of the Diocese of New Jersey. So back in that summer of 1874, the group of mostly summer vacationers who gathered in the park 150 years ago to worship according to the rubrics of the Book of Common Prayer would have had little idea of the consequences of most of the events I've just listed. They could not have known, for example, that French colonialism in Indochina would set in motion a series of events that would lead a little less than a century later to the U.S. intervention in Vietnam, which itself wrought enormous changes in American politics and culture. In the church, the creation of a new diocese in New Jersey was part of a wave of ministry expansion across the country. With more dioceses and more bishops, more congregations could be established and supervised. But now in the present, in 2024, as we face a new moment in the Christian church, in several places like Wisconsin and Texas, smaller dioceses are merging back into the larger original territories from which they developed, with the goal of sharing resources and creating more efficient diocesan ministries. The world has changed since that first Episcopal tent service 150 years ago in Library Square Park. And also, the church has changed. And that's mostly for the better. Certainly, if we're looking at what life is like for the vast majority of people in the world. And we have made significant strides in equality during that time to proclaim God's welcome in a more inclusive, comprehensive fashion. For example, who in 1874 would have imagined that today both of those dioceses in New Jersey would be led by female bishops? The Episcopal Church did not even have female priests and bishops until a century later, in 1974, with the rogue ordination of the Philadelphia 11. The church would then officially approve of female bishops and priests 2 years after that. And it would take another decade for the first female bishop to be elected. And although the queer poet Walt Whitman made his home in New Jersey in that year, I highly doubt anyone back there in Library Square Park could have imagined that a priest, who they would have seen as male, a male priest married to another man would be officiating at this service today. After all, most of them had no idea about Whitman's orientation. The man who wrote Song of Myself could not live his authentic life openly. The world has changed, and for me, that is good news. A year after that first tent service in the park, Trinity Church was formed. And for all those for whom a changed world is good news, we are here. And for all those left behind in our still changing world, because there is much work to do, for all those left behind, we are here. Trinity, at 149 years old, is thriving. We are full of life. And even as we commemorate the past, we are looking toward a bright future. History is being made in every corner of the world right now at this moment as we gather here today. But like those who worshiped together for the first time in that park, in Asbury Park in 1874, we have no way of knowing how the events of 2024 will shape the next 150 years. But we gather here today in faith that we join hands not only with those who stood in this place a century and a half ago, but also those who will be here in 2174, because they will be here. As we commemorate the past and look toward the future, Trinity Church is joyfully present here today in 2024 to respond to the spiritual and physical needs of this community. And as we do that faithfully, joyfully, vibrantly, we will help ensure that this place will be here for another 150 years, because the world needs a place like Trinity. The world needs it. And we all here today know that. We need it. And so let us join together, hands with those who've gone before and those who are yet to come, as we make this place Trinity Church. Oh, how good and pleasant it is when brethren live together in unity. Amen.